Hello, welcome to the stream brought to you by Team Hermit-a-Day May. I'm Joe Gianola, and I'll be the moderator for this panel behind the zines, discussing all that goes into producing a zine. We have an amazing group of panelists today. I think first we should get to know our panelists. Why don't you tell us your name, what role you normally take in the zine production process, and some of the zines you've worked on. Let's start with Redstone.
Hello there. Just checking, is our slideshow showing up? I'm on a little bit of a time delay. Well, while we sort of get that sorted out. Hello, everybody. I'm Unnecessary Redstone. People call me Red. I am a spreadsheet structure and art help kind of guy when it comes to zines. My main zine that I've been involved with is Hermit-Zine, which I've been with for the last, I'm realizing, 6 editions, which is a lot now that I think about it. But I also get involved with some other zines like Empiripedia, the Hermitcraft Season 9 zine. And I think even briefly I had a DSMP zine I was involved with, but that was a while ago.
Was it the Snowchester one?
That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Safeguard.
Yeah, Safeguard.
A lot of fun.
Wonderful. Well, maybe I can introduce myself next. Hi, I'm A10. In Zine, I mostly do anything I can get my hands on, really, but mostly it's participant communication, social media, and art. And I've mostly worked on Hermit-Zine 8 and 9, so the latest 2 editions, and Morningstar, the Morningstar Zine. I've also helped on a couple other projects like Empirepedia and the Couture Zine, but to much lesser extent. And
I guess I'll go next. I'm Stella. I go by Stellarum on most social medias. I've worked on a couple of zines in the Minecraft kind of YouTube sphere, most recently the Hermitcraft postcard zine. Before that, I worked on a QSMP zine, and I've also dabbled in some like Marvel and Star Wars stuff. I mainly work as the contributor communications mod, and I also do finance and accounting.
Hello, I'm Tides. I'm the head mod for MCYT Couture Design, and I'm also the comms mod for the Techno Blade cookbook design and the upcoming Gem Pearl design that's coming out soon for contributor apps.
Hey.
All right, I'm Shroom. I've only really been one zine where I was, the head mode, and that was Empirepedia. But I've sort of worked a bit on some other projects like that we're trying to get up and running behind the scenes, but nothing I can really talk much about. So for now, only Empirepedia, where I did pretty much every role just as head mod, but the main thing was running the actual thing.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. So, how did you get started in zines? Redstone, start with you again.
I actually did it by accident. So a couple of years ago now, I thought, I'm just going to draw some Hermit-Zine fan art. I drew a picture with Doc M with his shirt off, going with the caption "Tits out for science." At which point, one of the Hermit-Zine mods at the time, because it was pretty informal back then, was like, "Hey, do you want to come in? It's midway through the 2nd edition. Do you want to come in and do a piece for us?" I was like, "Sure. I'd love to get to know the community." That went well. I actually wound up giving them a hand for the 3rd edition just with marking pieces, because I have just far too many opinions about art all the time. And so it turns out I accidentally just sort of stuck around doing admin stuff during the 3rd edition. And when the 4th one rolled around, they were just like, "Hey, so you've been an admin for the last one." I'm just like, "What? I was? Okay." And I've been run it ever since.
Cool. Well, how I got started in the zines. Well, at that point, I had already been a contributor on Hermit-Zine 7, and I was friends with Red from working together on Traffic Zine 3, I think. And
Oh,
so
that
I
was a
just
lucky opportunity,
yes,
a lucky
for
chance
real.
there.
Thank you, Bio, wherever you are. So, and I knew Hermit-Zine was looking for mods at that point, so I just kind of clawed at Red's door until he let me in, and I haven't left yet. So that's how it happened.
Yeah.
It's been a great, it's been a great combo.
Yes. So I also similarly kind of fell into zine work. I got started in like the Marvel sphere, and I actually got pulled into a project because I was a friend of a friend, and they knew I could do some basic accounting work, and I knew how to use like Google email templates. So I got pulled in to help with that one project, and then all of a sudden, started working more and more on projects with that team, and I got a little addicted. So here I am.
I just had an idea, and I asked A10, hey, how do you make a Zine? And then he helps me along the process, and here we are now. And I'm just kind of like eyeballing everything else of like, hey, I can do that. Most
That's how
definitely.
zines get you.
Yeah.
Truly. For me, it was kind of similar to Tides. I had an idea. I could not feasibly ever do that idea alone. And nobody else was going to do it. So I was like, okay, I guess. And then Empiropedia was born.
That's awesome. Maybe we should start with how we are defining a zine for this panel. A10, did you want to
Yeah.
take that?
So zine is short for magazine, and that's why it's pronounced zine and not zine. Sorry, Tides. And
sorry.
what we do specifically are fanzines, zines for fandoms. So they've been around for a very, very long time, zines, and so since then they've taken like many different shapes and forms, and there's many different ways to make one. So we're going to be explaining how we make one, but if it's something you're interested in, I cannot recommend enough that you look into it. And so right now we're going to get into the overview of how one of our zines is typically run.
Perfect. And Redstone, do you want to give the overview of the general process before we dive deeper?
Sure thing. So I'll mention this is how I wind up doing it, and it's how pretty much every zine I've run into winds up doing it, but it's not set in stone. You take it in four different stages. Obviously, you've got your pre-applications, you're planning ahead of time where you're figuring out what the zine's about, what's your who you're running it with, a lot more nitty-gritty questions and details that we'll talk about a bit later. You actually get to the point where you need people for it, so you'll put out applications, you'll post on Tumblr, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram. That's when you'll generally let people apply to be part of the zine. Usually that takes the form of, here's a Google form, pop an application into it with some samples of your art or writing, and include some contact information. At that point, you get to do the hard work of assessing the applications, picking who's in, who's out, and letting them know via some emails. Then once you get into the production stage, you're pretty much, a lot of zines will use a Discord server just so everybody's in the same place and you can send messages, but that's not always how it's done. Some people do it through Tumblr or through Twitter because they do not fear pain. More on that later. But you're in artist wrangling mode. They're going to work through their pieces. Usually this is when you'll have a series of check-ins and an ultimate due date, just so everybody's got a bit of a sort of a few guidelines to keep them on track. Once you get into then you'll get into sort of release assembly. You're taking care of assets like the cover. You're putting it all together into a complete, hopefully nice looking PDF, and eventually publishing it. If you move forward to the next one, we've got a bit of how it sort of lines up in terms of the timeline of things. Thankfully, this sort of thing, it usually comes sort of nice and straightforward, one after the other. But you can sort of see from the timeline there that you usually want to do things like assembly early as possible, just so you're not sort of trying to throw it together all at the last minute. I mean, that's actually if you look there, we've got the actual timeline we were using for Hermit Zine 8. So it tends to be a pretty useful, pretty universal structure, though you might wind up changing the number of check-ins.
So obviously it
That's pretty
starts
much
with
all
an
good on it.
idea. Yeah. So it starts with an idea. How do you go from that initial idea to putting it out in the world? And how do you get people on board? Shrim, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. Of course, it depends on like your general zine idea. Some simpler ones just go down to like saying what the theme is basically, and then just explaining a little bit more about the specifics. But if you have a really like particular idea, a kind of weird idea, you're gonna have to do a lot more explaining. So I think that the first thing to do is to just get it clear in your head. And I think that one of the fastest ways to do this is to try and find a like real world example in like a book. So for example, for Empiropedia, I had a like kind of a weird idea in mind. I realized that it was very similar to art books for art history specifically. So I like figure out that was my base, and then I was like, what am I gonna take from this? And the main thing I took was just the general theming of having artworks and writing pieces in it, and the annotations that go like underneath and above them, that's saying like the dating and like oil on canvas, stuff like that, just general information about the piece. And that way I could explain it to others more easily because I had like a physical object in mind that exists. And I think that that's a really like good way to start. And you need to then like break down what exactly of that kind of book you want to take into account. So like if you want to do a cookbook, for example, do you want to do like both recipes and the drawings that go with them? Are the recipes like original writing, or are you like just sort of taking them from somewhere where you don't need to credit them? Just in general, what parts of that book do you want to apply to the zine, and how do you want to apply them specifically? And also I do recommend just sketching a little mock-up of like what you want it to look like at the end, just for the mods, so that you fully get the idea across. Because if it's a weird sort of zine, you're most likely not going to be able to just explain it with words, at least to the mod team. But that's pretty much it as far as I wanted to cover.
Yeah, Redstone, did you want to add to that?
Oh yeah, I'm in complete agreement. The thing that I find is you have to really just interrogate your idea. You need to look at what you're trying to do and sort of like it's very easy and very tempting just to sort of think in terms of sort of like you've got this vague idea, you've got the vibe of it in your head, and you always need to remember that you know exactly what the vibe you're going for is. But if you don't sort of prod at every little bit, go, okay, what's this specifically going to be? Then you're never going to be able to communicate that to other people. And you're never going to be able to sort of like sell them on the idea or sort of, you know, get them on board with what you're trying to do. So you really just need to sort of look at the specifics of, well, what does that idea mean? How am I going to describe it?
Nice.
Yeah, my main point.
So now you have a direction, you know that the idea has legs and there's interest. What are some of the things you have to start doing right away to start making it happen? And A10, you want to start?
Yes, so it's at that point where you're going to start to look for other mods, because most likely you're not going to be doing this on your own. So the first thing you have to do is to figure out what roles you need to fill. So, you know, assess what you're capable of doing first and what will need doing in the zine. So typically, different roles you can find in the zine are an art mod, a writing mod, formatting mod, who will assemble the zine, more on that later, communication mod, communicating toward participants, and a social media mod, communicating towards people who will read the zine. And if you're doing a physical zine, you'll also need a finance mod. I think that's pretty much it. Let me know if I missed any. And it's also perfectly fine to have multiple mods who have the same title. So, for example, having 2 writing mods or 2 art mods, or people with overlapping roles. As we said this at the start, many of us have multiple hats, as we say. So figure out what mods you need. And then typically how it's done is there will be a form, like a Google form, to apply to be a mod, similarly to how you'll be looking for contributors later. Except the difference with contributors is you'll be working with mods a lot more closely, and it's really hard to judge someone just based on a Google form. So what I recommend is also, like, in addition to picking people through a form, is potentially like asking people if you have friends who would be interested, or just people you trust. Even if they don't have experience, it's almost more valuable to have people you can work with than having people who know how to make a zine. Because the other point is you can also just ask people. If you've been in a zine before, you can ask the mods if they have advice. It's Tides asks advice for me about how to run their zine. Just don't hesitate to do that. People are nice, usually.
God, yeah. If somebody says anything about spreadsheets and zines, I am already in their house with a spreadsheet here to help.
I mean, yeah, just this panel is proof that we love talking about zines, so ask us. That's it for mod applications, I think, for me at least.
Yeah, Stella?
Yeah, I can definitely build off of that. So everything that you said is really important. The people you're working with are they're your team. If your team's not working, then the project suffers. But when you have a great team, you can make something really, really awesome. Another really important logistic you have to figure out before you kind of bring all of your artists and contributors on board is your hosting platform. How are you going to talk to these people? Are you going to do everything via email? You can certainly do it that way. Most people I know use Discord, obviously. It lets you have multiple places for people to chat, and it also gives you a great way of reaching out to multiple people at once. And when you're talking to people, you also have to keep in mind, time zones and making sure that you speak clearly, and just really having your communication strategy before you bring people in. It makes it a lot easier in the long run. You don't have to figure things out on the fly if you make a plan in the beginning. And that's my bit on hosting platforms and communication.
Speaking of planning, Redstone, you want to take this one away?
Oh, I made a graphic specifically for this to impress upon how important I find this. I also checked with the swearing things. You need a fucking planning spreadsheet. It is, in my opinion, one of the most important things you can do when it comes to a zine, just in terms of not just making your life easier, but making it sort of not a living nightmare. So with a planning, with a planning document, a planning spreadsheet, look, you're going to have 20 to 30 participants to keep track of. They're each going to be having their own particular journey through this scene. They're going to be at different stages. There's going to be different bits of information. You are not going to be able to remember who everybody is off the top of your head, let alone what's going on with them. So you need a point of a point of reference that you can easily access that will give you that information, so you're not storing it in your head. What I recommend doing is just using a spreadsheet in Google Sheets. It's free. Multiple people can access it. You can, you've got sort of security because you can limit access to specific user accounts, and it can actually be really simple to do. If you upload to the next, perfect. A master tracker. All you really need for it is just a list of your participants, a little spot where you can pop a note on their current status, handy links to their portfolios or socials, so you can just kind of check and go, oh, you're that person. Obviously, don't do that to their faces because that would be quite rude. You just have a little quiet check if they ask you something. Though that may just be me and my terrible memory for names. But you can also you can just sort of check information. You can see who's hit which milestones. Like you can see in the example there. That's just like, you know, you've got a series of tick boxes. You can see at a glance, oh, that person's hit this check-in, that person hasn't. And look, if you're a bit more advanced with spreadsheets, you can start working some really handy stuff like our master spreadsheet for Hermit-Zine. We actually use Discord IDs so that we're detecting matching entries for forms so we don't have to do it manually. And you can also feed your application check-in forms into the master spreadsheet, which leads on to, for people who've done sort of some basic Zine stuff, the most useful spreadsheet information in this slideshow. It's right there in the options, but for anybody who's used a Google form and has been lamenting the fact that they have to use like a million different spreadsheets for it, if you look at the options on screen, you go into the responses tab, you click on that link to sheets option, there is a second option, select existing spreadsheet. That means you can consolidate all of your forms, and you will have quite a few of them, into one spreadsheet. They're all in one spot. Admittedly, this may not make some sense to people who are absolutely zero for running a zine, but I promise you, remember that. It will be useful.
It is a
think I have
lifesaver.
Currently 25 tabs on
no.
my zine master sheet.
Oh.
Yeah, but consider, is it better to have 25 tabs on one sheet or 25 different sheets you have to remember what each are?
Take the 25 tabs every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, on the note of info management, we had a quick question in chat about that. What we used to make the planning, like the timeline for Hermit-Zine 8 earlier, it's called Miro. It's like an infinite canvas thing where you can add images as much as you want. So it's good for, you know, doing a planning as we did, and also just, you know, if you want to brainstorm thing, put on a mood board, etc. And also another big point is make a Google Drive, please. If you make a Google Drive for the entire zine, where you can put all your documents and it'll all be organized and it will be so much easier.
Yes.
Please.
It has been an absolute lifesaver for Hermit-Zine.
Yes. We have like a zine elements folder where we put, you know, for example, the cover or whatever else we're working on, a zine PDF file. I already forgot everything. One for form answers, that kind of thing. So, you know, so every
You
email can
also upload like social media posts, any graphics you make, your headers, your banners, anything relating to that, so that everybody in the mod team can easily access it.
Yes, yeah. And anything you might want to reuse or look at again later. It's you need to be organized.
Yeah. The one potential downside is the limits on free sort of Google accounts. But I mean, that's 15 gig, and let's be honest, if you run out, like we came close to running out of that with Hermit-Zine, but we have been around for 9 editions.
Yeah.
And if it really comes down to it, you just make a backup archive account.
You'll be fine.
Mm.
Yeah, this is probably a good point to mention. Yeah, put your questions in the chat, and we'll definitely make time for them at the end. So what are some of the things you need to decide on and standardize so that all the contributors' work comes together as a cohesive piece? Shroom, you want to?
Yeah. Okay. So the first point on the actual visuals is contributor expectation, and I think that that's a double-edged sword because you both need to set expectations for the contributors on what they're gonna do, but most importantly, even before that, you have to set expectations on you have the entire zine process in mind. You probably already have in your mind what's gonna go where, the entire layout, all of the contributors together participating. But what will the contributors, one contributor specifically, have to know to get to do their job? What is the information that needs to get to them so that they understand what they're going to be doing for your zine? So for example, for Empiropedia, we didn't really mention annotations at all. You can see in these little like graphics here on the visual. We didn't mention that at all because it wasn't really something that the contributors will be concerned about until the very end. So we only just put down like, these are the different categories we'll be doing. Within the categories, you can do this sort of style. So like, you can see the architecture one as like 3 different styles: isometric, blueprint, and like live perspective drawing. So if you want to do like, if you want to apply to architecture, these are the kind of things that you can expect to do later. So like, and then that obviously also has to do with like the scale, especially the schedule, like what will the contributors actually do and how much time will they need for it. And also you have to account for extra time beyond that, because there's always going to be like real life stuff going getting in the way. So it's just, you need to sort of put yourself in the shoes of a single contributor to the zine and figure out what information actually needs to get to them. Because if you put too much of it that isn't actually like necessary, you're just going to overwhelm people, and it's going to be less clear. I think that's all I really have to say about this specific point.
Depending on the Zine, contributor expectations are going to look different. For my Zine, I'm stylized after a fashion Zine. So me and the mod team basically pulled every fashion magazine we can think of. Vogue, Essence. We found Japanese magazines Fruit, which is known for its Harajuku fashion, and historical fashion ads, articles, as much as we can find to give our contributors a reference point, because it's stylized after a fashion magazine. So we needed our contributors to have something like a frame of mind. Also, for like the scale of the Zine, you would also like set how many people you think you can decently manage with your mod team, and like how, if you have an idea, like how many roles are you gonna need to fill? Like, I think one of the Hermit Zines, they had like an X amount of people, right? To fulfill some slots. Like, it was because it was like stylized or something, right?
The alphabet edition.
Yes. Yeah,
The alphabet edition.
Hermit-a-Day May. Yes. Yeah, we needed to have a very specific number of people because we wanted to have each letter to have the same number of people. So, yeah.
And there was still a lot of back and forth on just how to do that to give it a little bit of flexibility, just to make sure we weren't screwed if somebody like dropped out.
Yes. Yeah, and in the end, people did end up dropping out that we weren't able to replace. So if you look at the zine, some letters will unfortunately only have 2 people working on them. But you gotta roll with the punches. But yeah, that was a complicated zine to run, kind of, in terms of, I feel like we should have maybe done more planning, but also it was kind of hard to imagine what the zine would look like before the contributors actually got there, because we did want to leave them like the door open for what they wanted to do, like in terms of the format, just like if they wanted to work by teams, if they wanted to do spot illustration with the writing, or a comic, or do their own thing. It was a bit complicated. But it's
kind of the paradox. It's kind of the paradox of zine specs like that. Sometimes you can only really figure out if something works by trying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stella, did you want to add?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more about how setting up what your project scale is going to be can also really give you a better idea of how to set up your schedule. If you have a larger scale project, like the Hermit Zine, where you have 26 letters and you need multiple people per letter, that's a lot of contributors to manage. And when you're setting up your schedule, you have to keep in mind that during, for instance, if you're doing progress checks throughout your zine, going through 30, 40, even closer to 50 or 60 check-ins can be a lot of work for your mod team. So you have to account in your schedule for time to do that. It also affects how long it's going to take to format, and even just the scale of your zine can affect what you need to communicate to your contributors. So if you have a project that has to go in a specific order, letting your contributors know, hey, these are your neighbors, it lets them communicate better with each other and even set up some really cool collaborations. And that's what I have to say about scheduling and scale.
Yeah. I think if you have a physical product, this grows kind of exponentially. So what are some of the things you need to consider?
Yeah, it really does. I apologize if I get a bit verbose. I have a lot of experience making physical zines, so I have a lot to talk about. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, what are you really planning to create? I know everybody, we always have ideas. You have to narrow down what your idea is going to be, because depending on what you're making and the direction of your zine, this will kind of dictate what kind of manufacturer you need to look for. And in order to know what you can offer to your customers and what you need to tell your contributors, you have to know what the manufacturers can actually make and kind of get a feel for, how much they charge and what the manufacturing specifications are.
What are some of the most common products you might sell as part of a zine?
So the most common are stuff like art books and just books in general, magazines, stickers, sticker sheets, keychains. I've even seen zines do some really cool stationery. Most manufacturers will have websites with sample photos, and they'll have like their costs detailed, and they'll give you the specifications for manufacturing that item. But I do always recommend, kind of doing your research, looking at reviews, and comparing all of your options.
What are some of the logistics you need to consider when dealing with manufacturers?
So in addition to just looking at the overall cost for manufacturing your items, you also have to keep in mind shipping and taxes to have them sent to your packing mod, who is a very important mod role that's only really important for physical zines. And depending on what you're ordering and where you're ordering from, you might have to pay customs or deal with a bit more of an expensive shipping cost, depending on where you're ordering from.
Speaking of costs, what are some of factors that you have to think of when deciding how much to charge for your zine?
So this is always the question I get whenever I talk about doing physical zines is, how do you decide what you're going to charge for it? And your zine price should really cover not just the cost of manufacturing, but also the cost of the packaging material and the payment fees that you're going to incur when you're selling the zine on your digital storefront. I really can't overstate how important it is to, research and know also what taxes you're responsible for. Zines are not tax exempt, so especially in the US, you have to deal with stuff like income tax and state sales tax. Some other costs that you have to consider when you're pricing your zine include stuff like the cost of compensating your contributors. Some zines offer a discount for people who worked on the project. Others are able to afford, sending their contributors a free copy or compensating shipping. Giving your contributors some kind of discount or a free copy, it's a way of thanking them for their hard work. And whichever method of compensation that you choose, it's something that you have to remember when factoring what the cost of your zine is going to be and what your budget is. You want to charge a sufficient amount to cover the creation of the zine, but you also don't want to make it too expensive for your buyers. For zines that are raising money for charity, you want to charge enough to have profits left over to donate too. Each project's going to be unique, but all of these are points that you should keep in mind when creating a budget and setting a sale price for your zines.
Can you tell us more about shipping? I'm sure there's so much that goes into that.
Yes. So shipping is, again, it's another portion of distribution of zines that really only comes up with physical products. You have to charge your customers a shipping cost. This can be done by either charging a separate shipping cost, or you can even roll it into the cost of your zine. And this should cover the cost of sending the package to them, which can vary wildly in this current day and age, and it even varies depending on which shipping service you use. Personally, I have experience using a program called Pirate Ship, which offers discounted rates through programs like the United States Postal Service and FedEx. But it is something that you have to do a lot of research on, depending on where your mod who is shipping all these packages out is located.
What are some other logistics you think people should know about when it comes to physical zines?
So beyond budgeting, you also need to remember that manufacturing and packing zines, it takes time and it affects your schedule, and you need to account for it when you are setting up not only expectations for your contributors, but also letting your buyers know when zines are supposed to make it to them. So some manufacturers, they can take up to 8 weeks to produce custom merchandise, and depending on the number of orders you have, you also have to factor in the amount of time your packing mod has to pack each individual order to get it sent out to all of your customers. So all in all, creating a physical zine, it requires a lot more research and a lot of prep work in order to, be ready to handle all of the, extra details involved with creating, manufacturing, selling, and shipping physical media. But in saying that, I think as long as you take your time and do your research, it can be a very, very fun and rewarding project.
Can you talk more about the importance of social media and how you use it throughout the zine production process? Shroom, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. So social media is important throughout, but there are 2 points in the zine lifespan that are particularly important, and that's pre-applications, because you have to get the word out about the zine so that contributors can apply, and people can start following your account and being interested and following all your updates, but mainly just because that way you can get artists and writers to actually sign up to the zine and make the content for it. And the second point that's important is, of course, after the zine is done and you have published it, so that you can find the people that will be interested in either purchasing it or downloading it, depending on whether it's free or not. And finding those people is, key, especially when you are charging something, because it usually goes to charity or something else. But even when it's free, it's very gratifying for the contributors and the mods to see it appreciated and shared around. So those are the 2 points where you're gonna have to invest more time into social media, but of course you should be keeping up with social media throughout the zine lifespan. Ideally, sometimes things get in the way and you just don't have time. But yeah, just make sure that you can make time for it on those 2 specific points. And I also wanted to recommend that you prepare the social media for the zine way in advance to making your first post, because you really want to make sure that people, when they see you talking about applications or an interest check, that they can see what you are about. So have a nice profile picture and banner, even if it's not anything fancy. Most importantly, have good description, and when you make a post, make sure that you have a pinned post explaining the zine if you have something else going on. And I also want to quickly say that if you're doing an interest check, the best way to do it is a poll, because that gets people actually engaged with the thing, and they feel like they are actually contributing to the conversation. They are more likely to actually interact with it. So that's my closing note on that.
Yeah, a very good point about the poll. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
But it's usually interest checks are done via Google form. But a poll is very smart. Yeah. I really want to stress the importance of the posts you make, because 99% of the time, that is how someone is going to find your zine. It's through a post that they saw on their desk or got sent or whatever. And I believe chances are they're probably not going to click on your blog. So while having, a nice banner, nice profile picture is very important, I feel like the content of the post sometimes gets kind of forgotten about, because you have to think every post could be someone else's first time hearing about your zine. So you kind of want to always make sure it's always appealing.
Yeah.
So there's several points to go about that. First off, make your wording, a little bit semi-professional. Of course, that depends on the tone of the zine you want to do, but make sure it's legibly written and all that kind of thing. Include any essential information on your post, or have easy access to it. So, for example, if you have an FAQ, link to it directly in the post. If applications are open, and link the form directly in the post, and any essential information. So, for example, in application post, you include the dates that the form is closing on in the post itself. You don't just put it in the Google form, because usually people want to know that information before they click on the form. Clicking on the form is they're kind of already are motivated to do that, but sometimes you need to have more information outside of the form to motivate them. So, for example, in interest check, if you have an explanation of what your zine is, don't put that in the interest check. Put that in the social media post, or put it in both.
Yeah. Also, to quickly add to your thing, put images in all of your posts, please.
A what?
Images, just any kind of picture.
Yeah, that was what I was going to get into. Graphics.
Sorry.
No worries. Graphics are very important as well, because they grab attention, and zines are visual usually, so they also give an idea of what your zine is going to be. So if you've already decided on branding, for example, in Morningstar, it was blue with gold text on it with stars. That was our branding for all of our posts that we did. And the graphics can also be very useful. Here on the slide, you have an example of a post we did for Hermit-a-Day May, where Red drew an illustration. So the theme for Hermit-a-Day May was music. So the illustration was Doc listening to music, lo-fi girl chilling. And at that time, that was when the buttercups was happening, with like the perimeter and everything. So we included them in the drawing, and that post doubled their application numbers almost.
Oh, damn!
So don't be afraid to put in some, I don't want to say clickbaity stuff, but some trending stuff, so people are more likely to reblog.
Yeah, and graphics. I made my moderator apps, which you can see on screen, using Canva, and there's like a lot of free programs you can use to just like throw text on top of an image, and that's like eye-catching enough depending on like what your Zine content is.
Yeah, so if you don't have an art mod, or if you're not an artist yourself, don't be afraid to still make graphics.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. As long as you keep your social media strategy cohesive, your graphics can be really simple. And while they may not look as exciting to you as custom-made graphics, I promise if you stick to your theme and you keep a consistent posting schedule, you'll do pretty well.
Yes. Another point on the slide we didn't really address yet is password sharing. Obviously you're going to have to give the passwords of your social media to the social media mods, people who are going to be taking care of it, but make sure it's people you at least trust a little bit. Or
on the slide mentions reblogs. If you have applications running, you should like reblog the post every like 2 to 3 days, or make a new post. I use different time zones whenever I make a new post, and I just queue it up so that it can reach the most amount of people possible, because
smart.
people are not online at the same time.
Yeah,
that's very smart,
yeah. Yeah, and to mention tags quickly, make sure that you have like a general zine tag so that people can search it for when the contributor like actual works are out there. And also make sure that your tags are easy. This is mostly for Tumblr, but make sure your tags are easy to like explore, like so that people can actually find the specific things they might want. So I have a tag for ask, I have a tag for instructions for contributors. Just make sure that it's very organized so that people have an easier time on your blog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing to add is also posting is one of those cases where don't be afraid to copy people's homework. Like, don't copy another post word for word, but copy the structure, absolutely. See what kind of info is the different zine put in their post and do the same thing. If it works for them, it'll work for you.
Yeah, you can, if you look at it and think, I wish I'd posted that, you take a scalpel to that post and you sort of ask yourself exactly why it works and why it doesn't, and you learn from it.
Yes, still, but just a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we've gotten clear on the idea, the logistics, and how to communicate to that potential contributors. How do you select who your contributors will be? Red, do you want to kick us off?
Yep. So when it comes to applications, sort of, because ArtCrit is I'm the spreadsheets and ArtCrit guy when it comes down to it. So I inevitably, for any contributors, I wind up having a whole lot of opinions, and our application sheets for Hermit Zine, I've just usually got like a whole sort of page of comments for pretty much everybody, which is not a value judgment thing, I should mention. It is important to be compassionate when it comes to your applicants. You're going to get people who maybe at the start of their art or their writing, this is the first thing they've applied to. You always need to remember that everybody started somewhere, and so sometimes the best thing you can say about that sort of applicant is, look, they just need a bit more time to practice, and they'll you're looking forward to seeing them in a few years. When it comes to applicants, what I like to look for is their core skills and their willingness to try new things, experiment, and learn. Like, and I'm admittedly talking about this from a very art-focused approach. You can sort of extrapolate the equivalent when it comes to writing, but if I see an applicant who's gotten very, very good at drawing a really polished-looking head from one specific angle, but if you look through their portfolio and you realize, oh, they only ever draw heads from that angle, I'm less likely to go for them compared to, say, somebody who might have a few janky looking heads in their portfolio, but it's because they're drawing them from different angles, they're trying out a perspective thing. Maybe they didn't quite get the details exactly perfect, but they gave it a try and they look to be learning. Because you're much more likely to get interesting and varied pieces from the people who are a little rough around the edges but trying new stuff out than you are from the people who are firmly in their comfort zone and just sort of stay there pretty much indefinitely. Look, I'll also mention on the spreadsheet side of things, because it's inevitable. A lot of people, I've noticed a lot of people running zines like to do things like color code, color code applications rather than put in text. Look into conditional formatting, I'm begging you.
Yes, very technical. I don't know if we want to quickly explain how we go about judging applications, because we've talked about this before. We all have pretty much the same system. So I don't know if we want to explain that quickly, just for people, like the grading system.
Oh, that's probably a good idea. I mean, in the Hermit Zine case, sorry, you go for it.
Oh, I mean, you can explain it if you want.
I've been talking a lot, so I'll hand it over to you.
Well, we send all the form answers to one Google Sheet, so we've shown how to do that before. And the way we do it is every mod gets their opinion in. So we all look at each application and grade it from 1 to 4 or 5. So, you know, 1 being they're not getting in the zine, and 5 being I absolutely want them in the zine. Stella, I think you have a pretty similar system, just without the numbers.
Yeah, we take notes and then just use color coding.
Yes, yeah, we use the comment feature on Google Sheets, where you can leave a comment on a specific cell, and you can leave your thoughts on the applicator's portfolio, which is useful.
Incredibly handy.
Yes. And so we also do that throughout the application period. So, you know, as soon as applications start coming in, you start grading them right away. Because if you get a lot of applications, it will not be manageable at the end. Like if you wait until the very end, like when applications are closed and you have like 100, 200 things to look at facing you, you're going to be overwhelmed. So it's better to go at it gradually. And then at the end, when applications are closed and everyone has been graded, it is amazing to do a meeting with the other mods to double check all the judgments you put on people. Well, judgments, grades, you know. Make sure you're okay with everything, because, you know, sometimes you're more severe on some days than others. And just make sure that everyone is on the same page about the final roster.
Yeah, just being able to calibrate like that and kind of look back look back on your stuff and go, I gave this person a 2. Everybody else gave them a 3.
Yeah.
Let me look at that again. And as obviously, it's not a case of going, well, you know, the group has spoken. I got to change it to a 3. But it's pretty handy to kind of go, oh, I was having a bit of a rough morning that time. I was a bit harsher on them than I would be.
Yes.
That's also the handy thing about the system we have, where it's the 1 to 4, because it means that we can have sort of a 1 is a definitely not, 2 is a probably not, 3 is a probably yes, and a 4 is a definitely yes. Of course, that said, with Hermit Zine, we've immediately wound up having people score. You know, we immediately started scoring people, you know, 3.5s and 2.5s and you know, 2.75s.
Of course.
But it's still very handy
yeah.
as just a baseline and having some nuance.
Yeah. Also, I recommend going over it like multiple times, just because sometimes you get the first applications in and you don't quite have the entire like scope of the thing in front of you, and you score a little weirdly compared to when you have more applications in and you know what everyone's level is and like what you're dealing with. So like go back and look back at the first applications that you graded specifically with like a little more attention, because sometimes the perspective will like change your vote even drastically.
Yeah, I definitely agree
Agreed.
with that, Shroom. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're going back through applications, you know, after you've kind of gotten a consensus on what the general, you know, scope of everything is you can also then look and see if there's anybody with a particularly just wildly different or stylistic kind of mode of either doing art or writing. It might be maybe you had one contributor who applied who writes poetry, and they're the only one who applied with poetry. And it's always something to look for if you want to diversify, you know, the variety of styles in your project, looking for those people who maybe they don't have the strongest portfolio, or maybe they don't have, you know, the best artistic skill, but they're doing something wildly different that would make your project all the more better for the variety of including them.
Yes.
I believe the Hermit Zine introduced me to the wild card. Do you guys want to explain that?
Oh, you can. Do you want to go? You can go ahead and explain it if you'd like.
A10 introduced me to wild card. Each mod gets their own like wild card. It's like the person who wasn't originally going to be a contributor for the Zine, but the mod sees something in the applicant of like, hey, this person is really good at this like thing. I feel like they would be really interesting to have on, and it gives them like an automatic pass to join the Zine. Another note, for my Zine, we specifically looked for fashion pieces and how they like drew fashion, or maybe and we accepted like a very wide range of writing. a few people sent us essays as proof as they can write articles. So we had essays that we looked at, and like varying other like types of works like that.
Yeah, that's where it kind of joins back to the concept of making sure your idea is communicated clearly, so contributors can, or applicants can tailor their application to what you're going to be looking for. Because obviously, ideally in a portfolio, you'll only be showing pieces that are similar to what you're going to be making in the zine, because otherwise there's not really any point.
Plus, if you've got a well-communicated idea, and you're always going to wind up getting like at least one or two sort of people applying with portfolios or applications where you're just like, how is this meant to be connected to the thing you're applying for? And sometimes it's just going to be them. So having it's a nice filter. It's nice to be able to find that out before the zine actually starts.
Yes. Yeah. Put in rules before. There is also the point of if you're looking to fill out, I think this applies more to Stella and Tides and Shroom, your zines, than the ones I worked on. But what people want to draw. So, like for example, for Hermit Post, which Hermit they wanted to draw, that was taken into account, right?
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, Imperopedia was very complicated, so like I let Stella handle this one.
Yeah. When we did the Hermit Post zine applications, one of the factors for accepting people was each hermit was getting their own assigned set of artists to make a postcard. So we had everybody indicate, which hermits they wanted to create art for when they did their application. And sometimes it came down to we only had 3 applicants who were interested in doing art for Jevin, or we only had 5 who wanted to do art for Stress. So even though, looking at all of their portfolios, some contributor applicants did have a stronger portfolio in the long run, they only put down that they wanted to do art for the most popular hermits. So they were not accepted compared to people who had the technically less strong portfolio, but wanted to do stuff with the hermits who did not have nearly as many applications for doing art for them. So that is something, if you are, writing out instructions for your applicants, letting them know, hey, make sure you indicate if you're applying for a specific role, exactly what you're interested in doing, because sometimes applicants will accidentally kind of pigeonhole themselves into, I only want to do art for Grian because he's my favorite streamer, and I'm not going to mention that I also like to do, art for XP or art for this other streamer or content creator, because they don't understand that they can indicate multiple preferences. So definitely something to keep in mind.
On that note, I do recommend leaving a little open question at the end where you tell us a bit about your favorite hermit or something like that, because that way people feel a little freer, because they're like, okay, I'm gonna select all of the hermits that I'd potentially like to work for, but I'm gonna mention in the open question that I specifically really like these 2 hermits, so that the mods do know that I do have a preference. But if I cannot make the cut for those 2 hermits, they still know what other hermits I do enjoy making fun work for.
Yeah, it's like someone mentioned earlier, it's really hard to know people just through a Google form. So giving them, kind of a last little, hey, tell us more about yourself, it makes it a lot easier to sort through applications for the mod team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. I can't even think of how many we've filtered out a lot of people because we got to the tell us about your idea part, and it was something deeply unhinged, or they started talking about crypto.
Oh no.
What?
Did that really happen? Oh,
That
one time
happened.
we did get someone insulting the zine one time for the creatures, and I don't know if you remember, Tides.
Oh yeah.
They were like,
They
also if the zine
ridiculed
doesn't get
us for
attention.
not promoting enough.
Yeah. They were like, if you don't get enough applicants, just don't run the zine. It's like, okay, well, you're not getting in.
Oh gosh. I'm
So-
really glad that I did a zine for like Empires, which is a very friendly and very small fandom, so we only got very lovely people applying.
Yeah, that's another advice. Be nice in your application.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we talked about the mod side of things. How do you handle communicating back to the contributors?
Yes. So acceptance and rejection emails. Please send both acceptance and rejection emails.
Yes.
Obviously acceptance are the most important ones, but rejection email just provide closure. When you're rejected, it's so much nicer to have a definitive answer than being left hanging, and maybe you're still left with the hope that maybe your email just didn't get through.
Yeah.
It's much better. You can send batches of emails all at once. So, if you input every email address into blind carbon copy, you can just send one email to everyone that was rejected. And unless you get problems with your email, that should work.
If you've got a
no.
brand new email address that you've just made for the zine, maybe send it in smaller batches and slowly amp it up. Because if you suddenly have a spike of activity, that's apparently what will let something like Gmail sort of start rate limiting you, which means
because
that
it also
got
happens
rate
when you are
limited to
manually
15
Yeah.
emails a day.
Yeah, I got blocked by Gmail by sending them manually, very inefficiently. So it's very easy to to get that. But on the point of closure that Ethan was saying, I also think that if you can at all, like if you have enough time and enough people that are willing to take time for doing that, I do think that offering feedback is absolutely something that you should consider, because that just gives the extra closure to people who got rejected, and make it optional so that they can let them know that they can send you an email asking for feedback, and you'll let them know why they didn't get in. But it's so important. It also helps them, putting them in the mindset of, okay, I didn't get into this one zine, but there's some advice on how I can maybe get into the next one. And I just think that it's really important. I get why some people don't do it, because it takes up a lot of time, and zines already take up so much time. But if you can at all, definitely consider it, because it can change a lot for the people that you are rejecting.
Yes. Do take into account the amount of extra work that will be, especially since the beginning of the zine, when contributors are joining, it is a pretty busy time. Try to kind of be ready if there's any extra work, even though you can't really plan how many feedback requests you'll get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very important.
I love the feedback. People who ask for feedback and trying to give applicants feedback is simultaneously my favorite and least favorite part of the entire zine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated to handle. Feedback is a whole entire thing we can maybe get into during the production section. But yeah, I don't know if we want to quickly mention. Sorry.
Go ahead.
If we want to quickly mention guest contributors, since we didn't touch on that very quickly, because I know time is running. So just quickly explain what they are and what they're for. Well, I can explain it. It's very simple. It's just people you invite to be in the zine, typically before applications are running or while they are running, because the entire point of guest contributors is to kind of promote the zine, kind of help the zine get out there.
Build credibility for the zine to prove that yes, there are people on this project already that you can trust.
Yes. So you invite them, and then you make an announcement post that they're on the zine. Hopefully people apply, but then afterwards you treat them like a normal contributor, usually.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it.
Awesome. Now we're in the production process. This must be where things start coming to life and where the real chaos begins. How do you manage to keep things on track? And Grim, you want to kick us off on this one?
Yes, absolutely. So that's definitely like one of the most difficult parts about zines, because you really want to strike a balance that's different for every zine, a balance between like freedom and order. Because if you give too much freedom to your contributors and to your mods, it's just gonna be really, really hard to manage, and everyone's gonna suffer from it, because contributors can, like, of course, freedom is very fun, and it's something that everyone wants, and you don't want to stifle anyone's creativity, but it can also feel confusing when you don't have enough guidelines. So definitely try and figure out what you want your zine to be like. So for Empiropedia, we gave more freedom, and it had a very specific structure in the end product, but there wasn't too much structuring in like how contributors needed to make things. But at the same time, because we gave that extra freedom, we had to like put in extra explanations. So for example, I wanted to give everyone the chance to make different like styles illustration because of the premise of the zine. So they could make like sketches, they could make like some specific techniques for their pieces. So maybe it's line art, and that gets translated to ink in the actual like zine, within the zine. Then they can do like oil painting, watercolor painting, stuff like that. But that did mean that we had to put in the forms like explanations about what that meant. I made some little star examples that you can see in the visuals, and just in general, I put an option within the God, brain fart, whatever, in the thing to like choose which technique they wanted to use for the specific contribution. And I also, since some of the contribution could be a little less effort, like the sketch ones, I let them pick multiple contributions as long as they were sure that they could make all of them within the schedule. So they could, but that meant that they had to fill in multiple forms for it. And so you have to, for however much freedom you give, you also have to take into account all the extra guidance that you have to give. So I think that that's a really important thing, to just make sure you have it in mind and make sure that you are applying it. And also definitely keep like a channel on your Discord or whatever you're using for questions, because if things are, even if you are as clear as possible about everything and you have over-explained every single thing, there's still gonna be people that either didn't quite understand your wording, or they missed that information, or they just don't get what you are. They just don't get a specific part of what they're supposed to be doing. So definitely, just if you're giving freedom, you proportionately have to give extra guidelines. So keep that in mind when you are choosing like how much you want to tip the balance. And that's pretty much it for what I wanted to say for production.
Maybe I can talk a little bit about pitches. Contributor pitches is how you're going to decide who's going to be doing what in terms of contributors. So the first thing you have to figure out is how much you do care. So for example, if people have similar pieces, it's fine, whatever. Or if you're dead set on wanting to have an even spread between creators, or somewhere in between. And how you're going to do pitches will depend on that. So I'm gonna be honest, I haven't seen yet a pitch system that I think is perfect. So for example, for Hermit-Zine and Morningstar, we did an idea registry Discord channel where people could send in their idea, their initial idea as they came to it. It came to them, and then they could edit it. I've seen zines where people submit as many pitches as they want, and then the moderators assign them based on that, which is a good compromise, since at least for sure they're getting a pitch they like.
Yeah, because that came up with Hermit-a-Day, didn't it? Where it had very specific, things that had to be covered.
That was Hermit-a-Day. And for example, Elemental Traffic Zine, they like put out all the prompts at a specific time, and then it's first comes, first serve. I don't know how you do it, Stella, actually. Have you done it for Hermit Post or
So
or,
for Hermit Post,
Chronicles? Is it
we had it was a more of a strict guideline for Hermit Post because each contributor was assigned a, hey, you are doing Hypno, you are doing Grian, and our focus was mostly landscapes. So it was a focus on, their bases rather than focusing on the character themselves. For Chronicles, which was the QSMP zine that I managed, we also had a very similar setup of everybody was given the guidelines of you must focus on the character you are assigned. You can bring in, other characters as secondary characters, but please keep in mind that, your assigned character is supposed to be the focus of your work, whether it be art or it be writing. So we had a couple of times where we had to remind people of hey, we know that you're a really big fan of this streamer or this character, but please don't forget who your focus is supposed to be. So making sure that you not only establish those guidelines for contributors, but also enforce them is important to making sure that if you have a cohesive narrative or a cohesive theme you're trying to follow, that it's given to your contributors as accurately as possible.
Yeah, like you can assign them things. I had a point about maybe potential disputes between contributors, but I think since we're starting to run a little bit short on time, I can maybe keep that for the when everything goes wrong slide. We have the time, so.
Awesome. Now it's time to put it all together and put it out in the world. What are some tips on how to make this process easier?
And was
Start early.
We are all talking over each other. Okay, I'm gonna start off because I just have to quickly say, if you are running a zine, there are chances that either you are not going to be like the editor of the zine, and the person doing the formatting, or that you are going to collab with someone else. So I just wanna quickly say that I did collab with someone else while being an editor and doing formatting. That was Marzo, which most people here are very familiar with. And just to make sure that you are sectioning off the work if you do that, and just make sure that you have everything clear. I'm pretty sure I did like a little mock-up for Marzo so that we knew what was going on. We did some like trials with it. We had a lot of backups of the thing while we were sending it back and forth in case I wanted to go back on something or something got lost on the way. So just that's one of the parts where you really want to communicate even more than you feel is necessary. And also just a general advice, reuse graphics as much as possible. You can see the Empiropedia cover on the visuals right now, and like those little illustrations that are within the emperors are used in the zine as like an opening to every like chapter about the specific empire, because that way they all start the exact same way. They have that on the left, and then they have the painting of the emperor on the right. And so we could standardize that. So, but I didn't have to make anything extra for it. It was just already like in the cover. And, that stuff is used in a bunch of other places because it was very good visuals for what we were going for. So don't work when you don't need to. Make it easier for yourself where you can work smart, not hard. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, just there are a lot of elements to be made on like the mod side. You might think once you have all the contributor pieces done in hand, and oh well, it's over. No, you still have a lot of work to do. For example, you have to make the cover, for example, figure out the layout of the text pages, how you're going to present the credits. And if you want, we're also having a title page or end papers can make the zine look more like a physical book. And so how you're going to want to do that, there are many different ways. It'll depend also on your branding.
Having a cohesive theme for all of them really helps.
Yes, having a cohesive theme. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, because like with Hermit Zine 8, like you can see on the screen there, because we had that as the music edition, we had the theme running through that was a an old school sort of vinyl record, and you know, that went through the whole thing. That really helped us in terms of sort of not being sure, if we weren't sure what to do with you know, with any given elements, then we could always look to that to guide us.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I can talk a little bit about is with doing your formatting, look at other zines that are out there. There are so many free zines available that you can look through the PDFs. Look at what other people are doing, because it kind of gives you an idea of what you might like to do. For example, some zines, you know, they have a table of contents at the very beginning, or maybe they put their contributor credits at the beginning of the book rather than at the end of the book. For Chronicles, we wanted our book to kind of be as close to, you know, something you could pick up at a local bookstore as much as possible. So we based a lot of our formatting off of traditional typesetting, and you know, we had a very standardized format for how chapters were set up and how images were placed into the zine itself. Looking at, you know, stuff that is around you. So, for example, a traditional book or, you know, a vinyl record, it can really give you an idea of what to do in your formatting, as well as kind of give you inspiration for how to set up everything when you do that formatting in your program. Red, do you want to talk about programs at all, or do you want me to speak about it?
I can mention a little, just because as A10 mentioned, and I think Shrew mentioned as well, a lot of us had rely on the InDesign skills of Marzo, one of the who's been a mod for quite a few different zines. InDesign is one of the big ones that gets used a lot, and because so InDesign gets used a lot, there's actually a little bit of a shortage of people who are sort of like skilled in that one. So Marzo gets run pretty ragged sometimes. There are actually other programs out there. The tricky part is that there isn't really a good free option. Scribus is the closest thing, and apparently that is quite usable, but has a little bit of a learning curve. It's one of those things where my recommendation is, like, Scribus is usable. There's, I believe, Affinity Publisher. There's InDesign. Whatever you do, whatever you use, technically speaking, if you can export as a PDF, you can make a zine from it. It just comes down to how much you're going to be, you know, how many neat tools you have access to, and how much you're going to be sort of fighting against the program. I mean, to put this into context, when we actually put out the April Fool's Hermit Zine, that one, we made that in Google Slides, just because we did not have time. I did not have time to learn InDesign, and we did not have. Marzo probably would have just straight up keeled over and died if she had to put any more on her plate. So we just hacked it together in Google Slides and exported it to PDF, and it actually worked. I probably wouldn't recommend doing that for something that wasn't an April Fool's, just because of image quality.
Yeah.
If it works, it works.
If it works,
Yeah.
it works.
Absolutely.
That's really the key thing. So I will very quickly mention, you know, your first goal is just getting a PDF created. Once you've done that, it's very good to look into something like data merge or the equivalent, just to see if there are ways to make your life easier. But you know, get it created is the most important part.
Yes. quickly at the point of distribution, in terms of digital distribution, the main two options I'm aware of is Gumroad and itch.io. I know there are other ways, but these are two main ones since you can upload the PDF and people can download it. Itch.io is vastly superior. Do not use Gumroad. It's
Yes,
not worth it.
yes, exactly.
That's all for me. We can move on.
Awesome. So based on Murphy's Law, we know everything will go wrong. What are some of the things you've seen? How do you work through them? And any tips on how to plan, have a plan in place for when they do happen?
Yes, I will start on this because Empiropedia was a case where literally everything did go wrong. Like, I'm not joking. So, like, tech issues, we had, like, I think 6 computers just explode on us. They just stopped working for the contributors. So we had, we had to deal with that. And also specifically, like, I think 3 or 4 of them were for one section, was the Crystal Cliffs. So, like, we had an inside joke that the Crystal Cliffs section was cursed specifically. So that was fun. There was one very comedic tech issue where someone at the very end, they basically had it, like, their contribution done. And they their charger broke. So they were like, I have to wait for my pay to come in, order it, wait for the charger to get in, and then I have to actually finish the contribution. But it was basically done, and I felt so bad. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna give an exception to you, and I'm gonna give you literally until I'm done, completely done with the entire layout of the zine. For you to, that's how long you have until you have to submit something. They're like, cool. And then like a few days later, they're like, oh, I visited my parents and I realized that they have the same model as me, so I just took their charger. So it's fine, I don't need the extension. And I was like, cool. And then one day later, they're like, this other charger also broke.
Oh.
It was just, I
you will
could
get
not
the
believe
wildest
it.
possible stuff like that happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to be
All you
flexible.
really do is just kind of roll with it and see what you can do.
Yes, and
People
at
will
the end
drop
it was
out.
fine. Yeah, at the end it was fine, but that was crazy. And also we had like some communication issues where, like, for example, we had the portraits where the contributors had to make frames for them. Some people mixed that. And so in the actual zine, we wrote, oh, the frame could not be retrieved. It was destroyed in a fire for some of them. So also learn to go with the issues and try to incorporate them into the in the zine when you can.
Yeah, you'll always get someone who didn't read instructions properly, no matter how hard you tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks like there's somebody in chat who wants to ask us questions. Do you just want to move on to the question slide?
Yeah, I don't think we have much time left on the panel, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately. I feel like the few times we've talked, each time it's been 2 hours.
Yes, our meetings have been so much longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you
We're
have
really
It's
cramming it
an
in.
amount of stuff to ask and talk about with zines.
I don't know how fast
See, 'cause
questions
I
are
think-
going to.
Oh,
Sorry?
they mentioned that they would like to ask questions, but I don't think they've asked one specifically yet.
Oh,
Yeah, put your questions in the chat.
Questions in the chat.
Yeah.
No, I feel like we could do an hour and a half panel on each of these slides.
Yeah, honestly.
So true.
Yeah, we really had to run through
So,
it.
I have a quick
Stay tuned
one.
for the
How do you-
5-hour mega talk on spreadsheets.
Yeah. Separate topic, separate panel. How do you handle engagement?
This is.
They
this is a
just
fun one.
asked.
Yes,
Go
that's a
ahead.
good one. I don't know how to answer it.
Oh,
So the question
Faye
they
just
asked.
I think
You
I'm
go for it.
talking over somebody. Okay. She's creating a Zine, and it's difficult to gauge how many contributors she should aim for and how to gauge interest from the interest checked. For me, I just waited until the application period was literally over, and I graded everybody, and I decided from there.
So
Yeah.
Don't
I'd say-
anything interest check.
Yeah, interest checks, honestly, I feel like half of their purpose is to hype people up.
Yes.
I stand by the opinion that you should always like take any interest check with a grain of salt, because people are both very lazy when it comes to clicking on links and sort of mentioning it, and at the same time they're very keen to assume that future them will do a whole lot more than present them is willing to do.
Yeah, and people just
Yeah.
like filling out forms, even though they might not
Yeah.
participate.
Absolutely. But honestly, my advice for that is to set a max number rather than a like minimum number, because like objectively speaking, it might be a little underwhelming. But even if you get 10 applications and you have to run with those, or you get 10 applications that you are satisfied with, and those are the only applicants that you accept, in that it's still manageable. You can still make a zine. It'll be a short one, but you can make it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get like 200 applications and you end up accepting like 150 and you don't have the mod team for it or the schedule for it, that's an issue. So like try and set like a max number and do that based on your schedule and based on like your general idea. And then if very few people apply, it's not necessarily an issue. It just means that your
Means you've
scope
got a
is going to get
curated zine.
smaller. Yeah.
Maybe you didn't advertise enough. Faye is also the person who's running the MCYT theme park zine that was just starting up.
Yes.
You might have seen the interest check floating around.
Yes.
And I'll also briefly chime in and say that with responses and numbers, I find it very helpful just to make sure that what you're doing has some flexibility baked into it, so that you can scale it up or scale it down. Like for pretty much all of the Hermit zines, except for the most recent one, we've basically had it as flexible as possible. It would work with 50 participants. It'd work with 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we have
How
another
often do
question.
participants create up like Google Drive image links? It feels like every time there's a new check-in, there's more reminders to actually share the link.
Yeah. It happens
Out
often.
of my 80 contributors, I think around 10 we had to ask to resend the links or update permissions for. It's mainly like
Yeah.
by accident, but like
Yeah.
that's why the
It
warnings keep on getting
happens.
bigger.
we have the warnings on the application form. Like I think in Hermit Zine we pretty much say, look, if you don't share it with the folder with us, we won't be able to view it and you won't get in. We actually still
Yeah.
do sort of just politely ask them anyway. But
Yeah,
having that kind of dire, if you don't, you'll be disqualified. It helps weed some of them out, at least. Like some of the people
Yeah.
get some to double check.
Yeah, they pay more attention.
Yeah, but
But yeah,
there's
it happens
always
often.
going to be like slips like that. Sometimes a form is just like forms can be a little long, so it can also be that participants genuinely like miss something. I haven't had people not give me links to images or stuff like that, but I have had people like either forget to fill in a specific question, or maybe they filled in the form 2 times because the first one got eaten by Google, which happens, and they forget to rewrite a certain part. So that's bound to happen. But we do have 1 minute left, so maybe we do an
Yeah,
outro.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
people will misunderstand and misinformation in every possible way you can imagine. And the important thing is to have a certain amount of grace and patience with them, because they're not
Also,
doing it
give
on purpose.
yourself time more time than you need. So much
Yes.
more time.
Yeah.
Schedule like an
Awesome.
extra month and a half.
At least.
At least.
I would jump in and say that, at least speaking for me and Red, if you want to send an ask to Hermit Zine, if you have any more questions, we will very likely answer just about zine making in general, at least for our
Yeah.
side. Because
Yep.
I know
Yeah.
people have
Hey, you
Talk
multiple
also
your ear
have
off.
my Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's same for
Yep.
Empiropedia. There's not much going on over there, so feel free to send us.
Yeah, again, thank you, panelists. I appreciate you taking us behind the zines. And yeah, leave one in chat to thank our panelists, and thanks to all our viewers, all those in chat, and all our tippers. And if you haven't already, don't forget to check out our panelists on their socials. And that's it from me. Enjoy the rest of the stream.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jojo.
Thank you.
you.